I'm Amy, sex educator, sex and relationship coach, and co-owner of PurePleasureShop.com.
I'm April, VP of the cutting-edge sex toy company Hot Octopuss, and I dedicate my life to the business of sex.
We are on a mission to teach you how to have hot sex, deep intimacy, and how to make your own rules for who you are as a sexual being.
Welcome to the Shameless Sex Revolution.
Don't forget to head on over to our website at shamelesssex.com for more. And for 15% off of some of our favorite sex toys, use coupon code SHAMELESSPP in all caps at PurePleasureShop.com.
You are listening to a pleasure podcast. For more from our sex podcast collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the Shameless Sex Podcast, day 90 million in shelter in place. Dun, dun, dun.
I don't even know how many days it's been. It's 3 months, maybe?
I think it's officially 2 since mid-March when it was really the lockdown, but it feels longer.
It does feel longer. It really does. I know.
We're finally making our way out eventually, kind of, sort of. Things feel a little bit lighter over here. I wonder how it is for all y'all out there. I know it's different everywhere. We are, where you are. We are you, you are us. We're all the same.
We are one.
We are one.
We are the world.
We are the world. Okay, I'll stop. But April actually has a pretty voice. So April, you can keep singing. This podcast is with Ian Kerner, PhD, author of She Comes First and many other books as well. He has an interesting story in here about his own journey. He talks about ejaculatory control issues and his inspiration in learning more about how to please the pussy. It's a fun episode. Chip, you want to do a sex question?
I always love sex questions, for sure.
All right. Here
I
is a
love
sex
it.
question.
I'm very serious today, Amy.
All right, me too. This sex question has the word pussy in it. So, it's going to be fun. Bound to be fun. I am a cis woman in my mid-40s, and I have been in a new lesbian relationship for the past month. The newness and excitement is out of this world. However, it isn't very often that she returns the favor. Sometimes I get so turned on by pleasing her that I'm not even upset that she doesn't do anything to me. Sometimes it also doesn't feel good when she touches me, like I am so sensitive it kind of burns. Or I want it hard or soft and I just can't seem to figure out what I want. Or if she goes down on me, then I'm paranoid I smell or taste weird. And this is totally from my first relationship where my past partner commented on this. I'm just curious, is it possible to get off from just eating pussy? Or getting my pussy eaten. I mean, I have had some major orgasms before, but it seems like lately they just haven't been big or existing. Please help. Also, in this next question that's not here, she calls herself straight curious and proud of it because in between her 2 lesbian relationships, she actually decided to explore the D. She just got this I need to try some D and tried out some D. And so she also asked this question in here. She says, am I being affected by this? Is this because I tried a man and now it's all different in terms of her response to pleasure? What comes to mind here, one, there's this insecurity that comes up. Do I smell or taste weird? So there's some shame based on her first relationship. Also in that email, it was a long email, so we cut it, but it was a 25-year relationship that ended up becoming sexless. Pleasure was not very much reciprocated in that relationship as well. So it sounds like there's just some cleanup in terms of some past hurt there. And that's something I would share with a partner, to let them know, hey, when you go down on me, this is nothing about you. I get in my head because I have this story that I don't smell or taste good because a past partner told me that. If you think I smell or taste good, can you give me some reassurance and let me know, the more the merrier, because that will really help me. That's why I'm a huge fan of when people are going down on people, whether it's penises or pussies or all the in-betweens, you let them know. I love the way you taste. I love the way you smell. Your pussy's so beautiful. I fucking love your pussy. I just want to eat it all day. Things like that to help the person relax and feel good in their body. I'm curious how this is affecting too. This is, to me, I'm reading a lot of headiness. Sometimes I want it hard. I want it soft. I can't seem to figure out what I want. And I'm having a hard time experiencing pleasure. And so I'm curious about, more slowing down, less pressure on having an orgasm, less pressure on the goals, and more emphasis on just being present for all the sensations. That comes to mind. And there's the question of, do people just orgasm from just having their pussy in? Yes, they do. I'm someone where that's not my main way to have an orgasm. It's actually kind of hard for me, just a mouth on my pussy. I usually need fingers as well, like some pressure and things. So everyone's different, but it is possible.
When I was reading this question, she had said she was only in the relationship for about a month. And so obviously, the newness is really fresh and exciting. And it sounds like maybe they're just starting to discover each other's bodies, and she's enjoying being the giver in a lot of senses. And I think the communication piece is largely going to help the situation, especially if she says it kind of burns, or it's not the way she likes to be touched, it's too soft or too hard, but she can't figure it out. And it's going to be an experiment, because this current partner that you're with isn't your past 25-year relationship. It's not the two experiences that you had with penis owners. So you're going to have to communicate. And I don't think that each person out there, like, sometimes you expect a new relationship to have like all of this burning passion, and the sex is going to be like out of this world. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's less so. And so I think just slipping in, if you really like this new relationship and this new partnership, as Amy mentioned, kind of tap into figuring out each other's bodies and what you are enjoying, and try some new things too. Maybe incorporate some toys into your play. Maybe you'll find that that's really exciting, or strap-on play, or there's a lot of options out there. If something isn't quite feeling like you want it to, just keep trying and communicating outside of the bedroom. Remember, not when you're in the heat of the moment, but do it after a playtime or before you're planning to play, and kind of say, hey, I got this new toy. Do you want to check it out? And some people do get off from eating pussy, as Amy said. I have before, and it doesn't happen that often, but a lot of folks can.
A lot of people, it's their go-to. They're the only, it's like one of the only ways that they can have an orgasm. Again, it just shows how different we all are, whether it's conditioning from first sexual experiences or nerve endings and the shapes and sizes of our, our pussies and where our clitoris is located. Like, everyone is different. But I like what you said, April, there. It really just looks like communication. Like, I'm curious, in that 25-year relationship, how much did you two communicate? How much practice do you have actually speaking up about what you want and need? And it sounds like, there's past shame, so maybe you're fearful of doing that. But these are things to share. Share that when she's touching you and that it burns, don't say, ow, that burns. But you can say, hey, can we press pause for a minute? I'm starting to feel some sensations in my body that are a little uncomfortable. Or can we slow down a little bit? Or can we add more lube? Or just take a moment so I can feel what's going on, because I'm a little confused. Or right now I want it soft. Oh, wait, now I want it hard. This is really confusing. But sharing the paranoia about your taste and smell, sharing what it is that you want, sharing that obviously you're feeling like you go down on her and pleasure her more often than she does for you, and that you would like more of that. And you can say that all in a loving way. So it's probably just more practice on sharing on your end, and that will all get easier the more you do it. Just probably out of practice, as so many people are.
Well, that was an awesome question. Thank you, listener, for being vulnerable and open, and for sharing.
Yeah. Straight curious and proud of it.
Straight curious. I like that. All right. Should we read Ian's bio, Amy?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go. Ian Kerner, PhD, LMFT, which is Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, is a nationally recognized sex counselor and New York Times bestselling author of numerous books, including She Comes First, which has been translated into more than a dozen languages and is considered a classic in the genre. Ian is regularly quoted as an expert in various media, with recent features in The Atlantic, The Economist, and NPR, amongst others, and he contributes regularly to CNN. He is the co-director of the sex therapy program at the Institute of Contemporary Psychotherapy. Ian was born and raised in NYC, where he lives with his wife and two sons and their dogs, Oscar and Jitterbug. Esther Perel has said of him, Dr. Ian Kerner is one of the most recognizable voices in clinical sex therapy. To learn more, visit iankerner.com. I really wish I would have practiced my Esther Perel voice so I could have said that quote in her beautiful voice, but she has such a lovely accent.
She does. That's a huge compliment.
That is massive. That makes me very excited to read and that Ian got that cred. Yeah. All right. So As I said, to learn more, go to iankerner.com. But first,
you all know how particular we are about what we swallow. Get your head out of the gutter. We are talking about vitamins here. When it comes to vitamins, we are huge fans of Ritual. Ritual makes vitamins for women using high-quality ingredients from reputable sources. Not only did they choose the most essential ingredients we need from our vitamins, but they also did extensive research so you know you're putting only the best in your body.
I'm usually super sensitive to the type of vitamins I take. Well, except that vitamin D. But Ritual uses time-release capsules, so I never get nauseous even on an empty stomach. You want your multivitamins to be as awesome as you are, and daily changes can really lead to big results. So why not try Ritual right now? And Shameless Sex listeners get 10% off your first 3 months. Just go to ritual.com/shamelesssex to start your Ritual today. That's 10% off your first 3 months by going to ritual.com/shamelesssex. All right, let's get back to the show.
All right, everyone, it is episode time. Once again, we are very excited about this topic. I'm sure a lot of you are very excited about this topic. You all heard, if you listen to us regularly, April and I got our start working in the sex toy industry at Pure Pleasure Shop that I co-own with my mom. But now we sold the retail store. Thank goodness. And now we just have the online store, purepleasureshop.com, still going. If you want to get your sex toys, you get 15% off with coupon code shamelesssex. And we used to and still do carry this book, She Comes First. Ian Kerner, PhD, has also done other work. This isn't the only book that Ian has published. But this one I remember reading in like 2008. And I was like, yes, I'm resonating with this. Can we have everyone read this? Every penis owning individual that is loving the vulvas. Maybe you all can read this. So a lot of really valuable information here, and we'll talk about other stuff too. But Ian, if you could start, we always start the kind of same question. If you can tell our listeners how you got to where you are today in the realm in therapy and also writing the book, She Comes First.
Yeah, so today I'm a psychotherapist here in New York City. I see a lot of patients every week. Lately, it's been remotely, obviously. I also teach and supervise other therapists in the area of sex therapy, and I continue to write and publish books. And, my journey into becoming a sex therapist really began with my own struggles with sexual dysfunction. I suffered from premature ejaculation pretty badly, and as a young guy, turns out, today I have a lot of information. We know that PE is probably the most common sexual problem that men deal with, even more so than erectile impairment. Back then, I think I was sort of just living in a vacuum. It was kind of pre-internet, pre-men's health, pre-anything except really reading like the Kinsey report, which is like a really technical book. And so I really struggled with feeling sort of just sexually out of place, that I couldn't pleasure my partners in the way that I wanted to. And I got really depressed about it and pretty withdrawn. And then as I was starting to research how to overcome early ejaculation, I really started learning a lot about female sexuality and the female body, and particularly the clitoris and the power, and that the clitoris is the powerhouse of the female orgasm. And that even if I could last as long as I wanted during intercourse, that wouldn't mean that my partners would necessarily enjoy the sex or experience pleasure. And so that really led me down the path of further research and ultimately becoming a psychotherapist and a sex therapist. But I can tell you that it really just began with my own sense of being a sexual outsider.
Mm-hmm. I love that you also use the word early ejaculate. There's like premature, and then there's early ejaculate, because the premature to me seems like such a it's like such a story that people are kind of taking on for themselves, or like it kind of puts them in a box, like there's something wrong with you, and that there's like one way for this to be. Can you explain a little more about that? Like why you chose the word early?
Word choices are interesting. Sometimes I will actually use the word premature, but lately I've been using early more, At one point, we talked about erectile dysfunction as impotence. And today we actually talk about erectile dysfunction as erectile unpredictability. So I think in general, it's about language moving away from just a clinical or scientific diagnosis and trying to be normalizing and non-judgmental, and language that's a little flexible. And that's hard because sex therapy, really grew out of a sort of scientific research and data. So it's about the language just becoming more flexible to describe human experience and less stigmatizing.
I try not to say dysfunction, even when people are talking about erectile issues. I always kind of go in that direction because there's some shame that can be felt with an impotence, even way off. I feel like this is a revolutionary age with feeling more comfortable about whatever's happening. And I love this next question that we're going to ask you because, well, the title of your book is amazing. She Comes First. And also I am obviously a vulva owner. And so I relate to this and would love to hear what you have to say about why do you think it's so important for vulva owners to come first?
Well, I think in general, lately there's been a lot of research and science talking about the orgasm gap between men and women. I think certainly, at least, if we don't factor in the side effects of antidepressants, which can really, delay arousal and delay ejaculation in men, I think that a lot of men can tend to get aroused more quickly than their female partners. They don't necessarily require the same kind of foreplay or psychological stimulation or the same reduction of inhibitors in the sexual environment. And so I think it's easy for men and women to get out of pace in terms of their arousal arcs. I think also, as we said, the clitoris is the powerhouse of the female orgasm and responds to persistent stimulation more than any kind of penetration of the vagina. And there is actually, I don't know if you've covered this, I'm sure in your podcast before, but there is actually what's called a clitorovaginal distance, the distance between the glands of the clitoris and the vaginal entrance. And so depending upon that distance, that can really make a huge difference in whether a woman is going to experience persistent clitoral stimulation and pleasure. The variation can be anywhere from 2 to 5 centimeters. And so if the CVD, the clitorovaginal distance, is particularly great, it's possible that all penetrative thrusting in the vagina will not produce any real clitoral stimulation. So for those two reasons, I think it's a good idea in general for men to often pleasure their partners first. We also know that many women, unlike men, have a genuine organic innate capacity for multiple orgasms. So just because she comes first doesn't mean that's the only orgasmic experience as part of the sexual event. So and I've also found as a sex therapist, frankly, many men suffer from performance anxiety, and that performance anxiety can really affect the ejaculatory latency time, which would have caused someone to ejaculate early or lead to erectile unpredictability. And so when a partner has the experience of pleasuring their partner and knowing that their partner has had a pleasurable sexual experience, it just takes some of the anxiety off and can allow him to enjoy and participate more fully in the sex. I don't think of it as a rule. She comes first. I don't have any rules, but I think it can often be a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I could say as a vulva owner that that my body generally takes a fair amount of time to warm up as compared to the penises I'm usually having sex with.
We had this sexological body worker.
Your DTF.
And we both, yes. And then when you were saying that, I was laughing inside because I didn't want it because it was not a laughable moment. But Amy and I both had some work done. She was on our podcast, Dolly. And so she did some body work on me. It was my first time. And she said the way my clitoris was positioned on my vulva and then also my vaginal opening, like, she's like, oh,
It's
you're
really
always
close.
down to
Yeah.
fuck, aren't you? And I was like, yes, I am. And then Amy, she was like, oh, it
just
takes
like
you a long time.
Like your clitoris is like a whole different world. Like it's, my clitoris is much higher up than from my vaginal opening. April's is like more centrally located there. And you say it's your warm up is, I mean, it still takes you some time, but it's usually
but a lot, probably less than most people, but everybody's so different. But I know that from even a young age, I think wherever my clitoris is positioned, just rubbing on anything was like,
stuffed animals.
Yeah, anything. I was like, So it was a great moment. And we've had Emily Nagowski as well, who has great research and work behind the vulvas and their capacity to do so many amazing things. And they're all like fingerprints, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no rule to anyone's vulva or vagina. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and and speaking of Emily's work, just the fact that so many men fall into a kind of a spontaneous desire model and are highly reactive to sexual cues and can really process arousal so quickly, and that many women, especially in long-term relationships, are in more of a responsive desire model, which means they need to really percolate and simmer those sexual cues over a longer period of time. I think that's what often leads to that orgasm gap where, guys can really just sort of get out of the gate very quickly and sort of rush towards that destination. So again, she comes first isn't a rule, but it's kind of a nice little sort of philosophy that kind of works.
My current partner read your book like a year or two ago and said it was revolutionary, and I can just tell you he's an amazing lover. And and as someone who is one of those folks who is I describe myself as more energetic, so that's also responsive too. I'm really, my turn on is it's not just by seeing a naked body, it's not just by it's not like I just walk down the street and I'm horny all of a sudden. It's very much reacting to the energy and the environment that either I'm creating within my own body or my partner's creating or we're creating together. And
she's a Rubik's Cube.
Ian, no. But someone's got to crack me. No, but I could say I'm pretty sure your book probably had a lot to do with him being able to just show up as like such a giver, and that can create safety for me. My body can relax. I know we're not in a rush. That and it's not like he's trying to get me to do this so that he can feel better. Like he genuinely loves giving the pleasure and then also knows the value in it of what that will do in terms of my own arousal too, and then the places that we can go after that. I think that's incredible.
And what's so funny about She Comes First is guys read it so closely. Like they read it like like I will still, like, even a couple of days ago, like there's one misprint in the book that I've never been able to fix, or I always forget to fix, which is I say instead of licking when applying cunnilingus on the vulva, licking up to down, I think it says down to up. Oh. And it's like, it's that one little thing where it just says down to up. And I swear it's embedded in so much dense text and directions and tips and techniques. And you don't know how often a guy will say, hey, on page like 236, you said down to up. What were you getting at there? Is there something that I'm missing? And I'm just like, no, yeah. I love that you're reading it so closely. It's just a misprint.
Yeah.
You're like, well, just change the direction. Try multiple ways. You can go left to right sometimes too.
Yeah.
Your partner's
no
gonna be like, what? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're going to call me like, shit, I've been doing it wrong. No, there's no wrong. So with that, what would be some of your top tips for what we'll call vulva admirers, the folks who want to up their pleasure game? You said the down to up versus up to down. But what, and just kind of like the Clip Notes version of some of the top recommendations that you would share.
Yeah, in She Comes First, and you got to remember that book was actually written in 2002, published in 2004. So the dude that's like correcting me on my misprint, he's done a more recent read of that book than I have. But, I think, a couple of core principles in the book. One was that direct stimulation of the vulva, whether it's manual stimulation or oral stimulation, I really wanted to encourage partners, male or female, but generally male, to think of that direct stimulation not so much as foreplay as something that happens right at the start. I think a lot of guys think of, and this comes a lot from porn, just think of oral sex as sort of like the first thing you do. And in actuality, a lot of women will say, if it's too early in the process, that kind of stimulation just is intense, uncomfortable, irritable, sort of provokes the nervous system in uncomfortable ways. So I think I coin it core play instead of foreplay, like moving like that kind of direct stimulation of the genitals much later in the arousal process, and focusing more on above the waist stimulation, different kinds of kissing and touch. I'm a huge fan of psychological stimulation, or what's called psychogenic stimulation. A pet peeve of mine, every couple that I work with on sex therapy, the first thing I ask them during a session is to tell me about the last time they had sex. That'll be a question. I'll say, tell me about the last time you had sex. And so often what I get is just kind of a menu of physical behaviors, as opposed to any kind of like psychological behavior or any kind of like psychological or erotic connection. And we know for a fact that many women can fantasize their way very close to orgasm, in some cases even 2 orgasms. When I'm working with men who have erectile unpredictability and I'm trying to discern if it's organic and physiological or psychological, I'll often ask them to watch porn without touching themselves and to tell me how long it takes for them to get a full usable erection. And for most guys, it's like 2 to 3 minutes, they have a usable erection. So I feel like couples in their actual sex lives are really losing the importance of that psychological arousal. So I often really get my couples that I work with to get really psychologically engaged during sex. That could mean sort of face-to-face stimulation in the form of fantasizing, role-playing, sharing sexual talk and dialogue with each other. Or it can be side by side, like watching some great couples porn, some great ethical porn, listening to an erotica podcast, or reading erotica. So I'm all about like sort of adding like a new prologue that leads up into any kind of oral sex. Other tips, I think during oral sex, a woman really leads, a female partner really leads in a lot of ways in terms of the kind of friction and pressure and the area of the vulva that she wants stimulated. So I think very often, like I have a technique in She Comes First, I call it a gum press, where a guy sort of just almost like Elvis Presley snarling, just sort of offers up his gum as sort of a hard surface that a woman can just sort of press her clitoris into, and the area just the front commissure, the area that's just above the glands of the clitoris, or the head of the clitoris. And so I think, thinking of oral sex as a dance in which a woman can really lead. I think also remembering that so much of pleasure, and particularly experiencing orgasm, is about being able to drop down into kind of almost like a trance-like state, where you're not thinking, you're not working. And that means consistency and persistence, and so maybe not a lot of change or not a lot of variation when something's working, particularly as a guy's female partner is getting closer to orgasm. Like, stick with what's working, like a kind of a less is more, a less showy approach on the whole. I think, when you look at arousal, there's definitely a period of arousal where we're really turning on, and we want excitement, and we want connection, and we want novelty, and we want excitement. But then there's a point where we go from turning on to kind of turning off and losing ourselves, and becoming sort of the technical word would be entrainment, where we're getting into a kind of rhythmic entrainment. So I think you have to be conscious of sort of the structure of an arousal arc. And it's not just what you're doing with your mouth or your hands or your penis. It's really, and it's not even just, how you're doing it. It's really when you're doing it in the process of the arousal segment.
Okay, time for a quick break. This podcast is made possible by OMGYes.com. OMGYes is a research-based online program that teaches you all about how to pleasure the pussy. OMGYes studied thousands of vulva owners to find out how they orgasm and then made tasteful and inspiring short videos to show you techniques on how to pleasure yourself or another vulva. I've been recommending OMGYes to my clients for years and has changed their lives.
So for all you vulva owners or vulva lovers out there who may already be having good orgasms and you want to take it to the next level, or perhaps you want to explore more variety in your playtime, OMGYes will have something just for you. With 2 seasons, one all about internal and the other all about external techniques, it's better than any book or DVD money can buy. To learn more, visit omgyes.com/shameless. Our listeners get $5 off. Check it out.
This podcast was also made possible by Uberlube. It's a luxurious silicone lubricant great for all kinds of sex. It's less likely to throw off the pH than most other lubes, and there are hundreds of doctors who recommend Uberlube to their patients, whether they want to make their hot sex even hotter or for folks who are experiencing dryness. You never knew lube could be this good.
So whether you're an avid lube lover or you've never used lube before, Uberlube is right for you. It has no flavor, no scent, and feels absolutely amazing on the body. Uberlube has endless uses. I use it to tame my hair frizzies, to prevent chafing, and I even put some in my mouth right before an oral sex session, and it totally ups my blowjob game. Oh, and the bottle, it's gorgeous. It's totally discreet and looks more like a beautiful cosmetic product, so you can even leave it on your nightstand shamelessly.
To learn why we think it's the best lube on the planet, check out uberlube.com. Use code SHAMELESSSEX and you get 10% off and free shipping. That's uberlube.com. Go check it out. And now back to the show.
When you talked about the conscious entrainment, is that something that you can shift by tapping into your body? Is that when you just get in your head or is it, I don't know scientifically what it's caused, because I've experienced extreme pleasure, especially with cunnilingus, and then all of a sudden it'll like switch off and I feel like it's a head thing. And do you have any kind of suggestions when that conscious entrainment happens? Now I'm going to use that. I'm like, I'm consciously entraining myself right now. Damn it.
There was a study done where I think it was in Holland, and this may have come up in previous podcasts, but the researchers put women in fMRI scanners and had them masturbate and wanted to see what was happening in the brain. And parts of the brain that were very much associated with like genital stimulation really lit up, and like the brain was really getting lit up. But the more aroused a woman was getting, at a certain point, a part of the brain that was really associated with sort of outside activity, outside stressors, the amygdala and the limbic system really started to deactivate and go dark. And so it was almost like you had to like turn on to turn off. And I guess your question, April, is like, what are the characteristics of sort of being able to get into that turned off state?
And what can you do? Yeah, to kind of switch back to the turn on state, or can you?
Well, I think what happens is you get very, very, very turned on. And then at a certain point, you really sort of get very absorbed in the sex that you're having. And if what you're doing is relaxing, pleasurable, rhythmic, you don't have to suddenly think about a new position or how you're doing. Your brain actually goes into you start to access routines that are stored in a part of your brain that's like more unconscious. It's like, think about it. Like if you're driving, you both live in Santa Cruz, you both drive, like, right? Like you can probably drive from point A to point B without even thinking about it, without even remembering anything about the drive, except that you started at point A and you started at point B. Your brains are accessing very familiar routines that help you. Now, if you were to suddenly come to New York City and drive in the middle of traffic, like you'd be scanning your environment, you'd be thinking all the time. I think that sex is a little bit like that drive in Santa Cruz. It can begin, trust me, it can begin super exciting. There can be a lot to look at, a lot to do, a lot to steer, a lot to navigate. But for sex to work, to sort of transition into that absorbed state of entrainment, you have to access familiar routines. You can't be thinking about the sex that you're having. You can't be wondering about your performance. You can't be trying something new or a new position. So it's having good familiar routines with your partner that you know work, and when to sort of enter into those routines. It's about, when I say getting turned on, it's also about getting your mind sort of almost like mindfully aroused in the present, whether you're really aroused by the body that's sort of you're connecting with, or you're really aroused by the fantasy that you're watching, or you're really aroused by the fantasy that you're thinking about. You want to get those high levels of arousal, and then you want to be able to like transition into that more entrained trance-like state.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that sort of answers the question in any way, but.
No, and what came to mind is you were saying that for me, I could speak with my arousal. It's almost like I feel the arousal kind of building up, but it's light, and like there's a little bit there, and maybe my mind comes in and out, and then all of the sudden over time something kind of clicks, and I can feel like there it goes. It's like and part of my mind leaves, my mind comes off. It's all sensation and feeling, and I'm staying in my body and focus on just what is happening, the sensations in here, and then it just does its thing. Like it's like this program that needs me to get out of my own way for it to drop in there. And part of it is from also having the experience of what that feels like beforehand. And so I get my question for you with that is two parts. I think it's really hard for all people to get out of their own way. Their minds go, it's just what the mind does. So for vulva owners who have a difficult time getting out of their own way, if there's any tips for that, which you just kind of shared. And then also, how would you suggest a vulva owning individual who wants their vulva admiring partner to read your book? And this is a question we get a lot from listeners. How do I talk to my partner about this? I don't want to tell them I think they're a terrible lover. How do I request that they maybe learn more about this to amp up our sex life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, right? Like, most of the time when we talk about sex, it's a very vulnerable topic, and we don't necessarily have as much emotional safety with our partner around those topics, and it's easy to either be triggered and become defensive, or to trigger someone's defenses. And how do we not trigger each other's defenses and escalate, but get back to the vulnerable place? Here's my short answer, which is, I don't like, when I'm working with couples, I like to get them from a place, or individuals, of talking about a sexual problem to talking about a sexual solution. Okay, so great, talk about the problem, talk about like how your partner isn't a good lover, or whatever he or she is not doing, but then start to tell me about the solution that you think. And the solution is positive, and then the solution can actually start to become sexy if you describe it, right? If you stop describing all the terrible ways that your partner makes love to you, and you start describing the ways you really want to be made love to, the ways you really want to have sex, you're actually starting to engage like the language of sex. And that is in itself sexually arousing. So I always tell people, like, figure out what the problem is, figure out where you're disturbed, but then present it to your partner almost in the form of like a fantasy. You can go to your partner and say, I had the sexiest dream about you last night. And I don't know what my unconscious was, what was up with my unconscious, but we were doing some really hot things. And, hopefully you have a partner that's curious and gets engaged. And then you start to describe, like, hopefully the kind of sex that you want. whether it's more oral sex or different positions or different types of foreplay, or, so that would sort of be my approach to talking about sex with a partner.
I like that. It feels, so it's like you're still they're talking about, like, there's some stuff that's missing here. You're at least acknowledging that, but you're reframing the conversation to be about what it is that you want and desire. And yeah, you can throw it in with like, or you could even probably like, hey, I listened to this podcast and there was this guy, Ian Kerner, PhD, who wrote a book, and I was hearing all these things. I got kind of turned on when I was listening to that. And he talked about these techniques. I'm wondering if maybe we could try them, if you'd be open to learning about that. It might be, I would be sold on that one.
Totally. It's honestly why I still even talk about like my issues with premature ejaculation, because I feel like it just sort of like normalizes that we all have struggled or struggle with sexual issues. And sometimes people will even say like, yeah, I heard this guy on this podcast and he had, all of these issues, and then this was the solution. So, I think the work that you got that you're doing with podcasts is great, because anytime I do a podcast, I definitely always hear people, people come back to me and say, hey, I heard you on that podcast. I liked what you had to say.
Yeah. I think getting out the piece that always that's my issue in life, is getting out of my own way. And especially sometimes when I am in a sexual experience with my partner, I can tell, I'm like, oh, I'm already in my own way, I'm not going to orgasm. And then I just keep that like story going on in my head, and I'm like, I need to just tap in to what is actually happening to my body. And I think that a lot of times with vulva owners too, there's at least, and I won't speak for everyone, but I can tell you that I have all of this anxiety and sort of I guess it would be shame, because sometimes the lubrication can't happen for me naturally. And that's something that my partner has ingrained into his head, into his being, that because I'm not lubricated, I don't want to have sex with him. So then I get in my head about that. And I'm like, hey, vulva owners out there, everything shifts and changes. And that's something that's been a challenge for me as I'm getting older. I'm like, damn it, but that could shift too. When I'm 45, I could start getting super wet. So I don't know. I want people out there to understand that like arousal is so much like a part of your brain to you're connecting to your nerves, right?
Yeah, and you've had Emily Nagoski on. She talks a lot about this. Your brain and your body aren't always connected, especially during sex. I mean, you could be, for some reason, for any reason, you could be very, very lubricated, but that doesn't mean you're at all turned on or you're interested in sex. And I work with so many men who feel so much desire in their head, but that desire can't just get expressed or manifested, in their genitals, but they're really turned on. Their partners often think they're not turned on. Their partners often think, what's wrong with you, or, what's wrong with me? But yes, we do have to accept that there is often a disconnect sexually between our minds and our bodies. And that I think especially any kind of anxiety about sex, performance anxiety, starting to think about sex, starting to worry about a problem, that just becomes such a self-feeding sort of vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The downward spiral.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the rabbit hole.
And I talk about that all the time. It's just sometimes it's hard because you do just get stuck in it. So I'm happy that you came on the show. This was such an incredible interview. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. And you have a lot of other books as well. Can you tell people out there if they want to work with you or find you or buy one of your books or all of your books and meet up with you? And I'm just kidding.
Date you. Just
yeah.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the kind words. And, I hope that there's some good information in this that can come across. People can find me at my website, iankerner.com. The book I'm most proud of so far is She Comes First. There was a follow-up book called He Comes Next, which was retitled in paperback. It was called Passionista. And I'm kind of proud of that book too. And those are the two that I would focus on. I have a new book that's going to be coming out probably early 2021 called So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. And I'm really proud of that. I feel really good about the research, the science, some of the concepts that we talked about today, along with techniques are really baked in there. And yeah, I don't do a lot of social media or anything like that. It's just not so good for my head personally. So I would say just anybody can always email me through my website.
And you can buy She Comes First at purepleasureshop.com as well.
Yep, they have it there as well.
Yeah, that's a great
and probably from your do you sell it directly on your website as well? She Comes First?
No, I don't, but I'll link to your website and
oh, cool.
Oh, thanks.
Your website.
You can support my mom.
That is
mother-daughter sex shop.
Well, Ian, absolutely such a pleasure, and just really so happy that you came on our show. So thank you for your time. And to all of our beautiful listeners out there, you all come first in my book, right? So if you are in isolation, or maybe you're not at this point, some people may not be. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. Why don't you check out a glass of wine, whether you're outside or inside, wherever you are, from marginswine.com. She makes beautiful wines, as Amy and I have been experiencing now for 2 years. So go to marginswine.com. There's some coupon codes on our website. And I believe if you buy 6 bottles, you'll just save money. 6 by 12. By 12, you'll save more money. Okay.
So go get the code online.
Go get the code. All right, y'all. We love you. And Amy and I, thank you for being part of the Shameless Sex Revolution. We'll see you next Tuesday and maybe next Friday. We'll see. Love you. Ciao for now.
Don't forget to head on over to our website at shamelesssex.com for more. And for 15% off of some of our favorite sex toys, use coupon code SHAMELESSPP in all caps at purepleasureshop.com.